I didn't warn my sister about her BF's surprise proposal at her birthday party. Now my whole family hates me and thinks I ruined her life. I, 32F, have always had a complicated relationship with my younger sister Ruth, 25F. Growing up, Ruth was the golden child in our family, while I often felt overlooked and unappreciated. This dynamic started when Ruth was born. I was 7 years old at the time, and I remember being excited to have a little sister. But as Ruth grew, it became clear that she was the center of our parents' world. Our childhood was filled with instances of this favoritism. When I was 10, I worked hard all year to get straight A's, hoping my parents would finally notice my achievements. They barely glanced at my report card. But when Ruth brought home a B+ in math at age 8, they threw her a celebration dinner and bought her a new bike. It was always like that. My accomplishments were expected, while Ruth's were praised to the skies. As teenagers, the divide only grew. I joined the debate team and made it to state finals, but my parents couldn't attend because Ruth had a dance recital the same day. When I got my driver's license, I had to share an old beater car with my mom. But on Ruth's 16th birthday, our parents surprised her with a brand new car of her own. The pattern continued into our adult years. When I graduated college, my parents gave me a $500 check. When Ruth graduated a few years later, they bought her a car and paid for a month-long trip to Europe. For my wedding, they contributed $5,000. For Ruth's upcoming wedding, they've already committed to paying for the entire thing: venue, catering, dress, everything. I've tried to let go of my resentment over the years, but it's been difficult. Especially because Ruth has grown into a rather entitled and self-centered adult. She expects everyone to cater to her whims and throws tantrums when things don't go her way. Last year, our grandmother passed away. She and I had always been close, I think because she recognized how overlooked I often felt in the family. In her will, she left her antique diamond ring to me. It wasn't particularly valuable, but it meant a lot to me because of my relationship with my grandmother. Ruth was furious about the ring. She showed up at my house the day after the will reading, demanding that I give it to her. She claimed she deserved it more because she was closer to our grandmother, not true, and because jewelry should go to the youngest daughter, not a thing. When I refused, she screamed at me for an hour, calling me selfish and accusing me of stealing from her. She didn't speak to me for months after that. Recently, Ruth started dating a guy named Andy, 27M. They met at a yoga retreat and hit it off immediately. Andy seems nice enough, but way too eager to please Ruth. He's constantly buying her expensive gifts and planning elaborate dates to impress her. Last month, he surprised her with a weekend trip to a vineyard, complete with a private wine tasting and hot air balloon ride. About a month ago, Andy reached out to me for help. He was planning to propose to Ruth at her upcoming 25th birthday party and wanted my input on how to make it special. I was surprised, given that they'd only been dating for 6 months. But Andy insisted that Ruth was the one and he couldn't wait to marry her. I tried to gently suggest that it might be too soon for a proposal. I pointed out that they hadn't known each other very long and hadn't discussed important topics like finances or future plans. But Andy wouldn't hear it. He had this whole plan to do it in front of all Ruth's friends and family at the party. He wanted to hire a string quartet to play her favorite song, then get down on one knee and present her with a massive diamond ring. I had a feeling Ruth wouldn't react well to a public proposal, especially one that took attention away from her on her birthday. Ruth has always been the type who needs to be the center of attention. I remembered her high school graduation, where she had a meltdown because our cousin announced her pregnancy at the family celebration afterward. Ruth felt like her special day had been ruined. Despite my reservations, Andy was determined to go through with his plan. He spent weeks coordinating with the party planner and ring designer, wanting everything to be perfect. Part of me wanted to warn Ruth about the proposal. I knew she'd be upset if she was caught off guard in front of everyone. But another part of me thought it might be satisfying to see her reaction when someone else stole the spotlight for once. In the end, I decided not to say anything and let things play out. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere in their relationship. If Andy wanted to propose and Ruth didn't like it, that was between them. The birthday party was last weekend. As expected, Ruth was in her element, soaking up all the attention. She'd insisted on an extravagant Gatsby-themed celebration and upscale venue. There were professional dancers, a champagne fountain, and a 7-tier cake. Our parents had spared no expense, as usual. Ruth spent the night flitting from group to group, basking in compliments on her outfit, a custom-made beaded gown that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She kept interrupting the DJ to make announcements and toasts to herself. It was classic Ruth behavior, but it still grated on me. Towards the end of the night, Andy got up to make a speech. I could see the excitement on his face as he started talking about how much he loved Ruth. The string quartet began playing softly in the background. But before Andy could get to the proposal, Ruth interrupted him. She loudly complained that his speech was going on too long and people were getting bored. She made a joke about Andy loving the sound of his own voice, which got some awkward laughs from the crowd. Poor Andy looked crushed as Ruth grabbed the microphone away. She started rambling about how amazing she was and how grateful everyone should be to celebrate her. Andy tried to get her attention, even reaching for the ring box in his pocket. But Ruth was oblivious, too caught up in herself to notice. After the party, Andy pulled me aside. He was devastated that his proposal had been ruined. I felt a twinge of guilt for not warning him about how Ruth might react. But I also couldn't help feeling a bit of satisfaction at seeing my sister's selfish behavior backfire for once. The next day, Ruth called me in a rage. Apparently Andy had told her about the failed proposal attempt. She was furious that he tried to make her birthday all about him. But she was even angrier at me for not giving her a heads up. She accused me of deliberately setting her up to look bad in front of everyone. I told Ruth that it wasn't my place to interfere in her relationship. If she had a problem with Andy's actions, she should take it up with him. This only made her more upset. She hung up on me after saying I was a terrible sister who was clearly jealous of her perfect life. Now our parents are mad at me too. They say I should have warned Ruth so she could have avoided the embarrassing scene. My mom implied that I was trying to ruin Ruth's relationship out of spite. My dad said I should apologize to both Ruth and Andy for my role in the failed proposal. But I don't think I did anything wrong by staying out of it. Andy is an adult who made his own choice, and Ruth is old enough to deal with the consequences of her actions. Still, I can't help wondering if I should have handled things differently. So Reddit, Ida for not warning my sister about her boyfriend's proposal plan? Update 1, it's been about 2 weeks since my original post, and a lot has happened. I really appreciate all the feedback and perspectives shared in the comments. After reading through everything, I realized I needed to have an honest conversation with Ruth about our relationship. I invited Ruth out for coffee, hoping we could talk things through. To my surprise, she actually agreed to meet. When we sat down, I started by apologizing for not giving her a heads up about Andy's proposal plan. I explained that I was trying not to interfere, but I could see how it came across as unsupportive. Ruth was quiet for a moment, then shocked me by bursting into tears. Between sobs, she confessed that she and Andy had broken up. Apparently, the failed proposal attempt had led to a huge fight. Ruth admitted she'd overreacted at the party and said some hurtful things to Andy afterwards. She'd accused him of trying to overshadow her and questioned whether he really loved her or just wanted the attention of a big proposal. Andy was hurt by her accusations and decided he couldn't be with someone who cared more about being the center of attention than his feelings. As Ruth cried, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me was satisfied to see her facing consequences for once. But I also felt bad seeing my little sister so upset. I awkwardly patted her hand and listened as she vented about the breakup. Once Ruth calmed down, we had a long, honest talk about our relationship. I opened up about feeling overlooked growing up and how that had affected me. I told her about specific incidents that had hurt me, like the time our parents missed my high school art show because Ruth had a cold. Or when they forgot my college graduation but threw Ruth a huge party for finishing her associate's degree. To my surprise, Ruth listened without getting defensive. She admitted that she'd always known our parents favored her, but she'd never really thought about how it affected me. She confessed that she'd actually been jealous of me in some ways. She thought I was smarter and more independent. She said she'd always felt pressure to be perfect because that's what our parents expected of her. We both realized there were a lot of misunderstandings and unspoken resentments between us. Ruth apologized for how she'd reacted about our grandmother's ring. She said she'd lashed out because she felt hurt that Grandma had chosen me, even though she knew we were closer. She offered to return some jewelry our parents had given her over the years to make things more equitable. I declined, but appreciated the gesture. We talked about our different personalities and how they'd shaped our relationship. I admitted that I sometimes found Ruth's need for attention exhausting. She acknowledged that she could be self-centered and said she wanted to work on being more considerate of others. By the end of our talk, we'd made some progress. We agreed to work on communicating better going forward. Ruth said she'd try to be more aware of how her actions affected others. I promised to be more direct instead of bottling up my frustrations. We even made plans to get together for dinner next week to continue rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't a magic fix for years of issues, but it felt like a step in the right direction. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about my relationship with my sister. Unfortunately, things with our parents are still tense. They're upset that Ruth and Andy broke up, and are blaming me for not preventing the proposal drama. I tried explaining that it wasn't my responsibility to manage Ruth's relationship, but they insist I should have protected her. My mom keeps making passive-aggressive comments about how I've always been jealous of Ruth. My dad suggested that I should help Ruth win Andy back to make up for my mistake. It's frustrating to see that even now, They can't seem to see my side of things. But I'm trying not to let it get to me. I've realized that I can't control how my parents think or act. All I can do is focus on improving my own relationships and setting healthy boundaries. For now, I'm cautiously optimistic about rebuilding my relationship with Ruth. It won't be easy to overcome years of resentment and misunderstandings. But I'm willing to put in the effort if she is too. Only time will tell if we can truly move past our issues and develop a stronger sisterly bond. Update 2. It's been about a month since my last update, and things have taken an unexpected turn. Ruth and I had been making progress on improving our relationship. We'd had a few good talks and even enjoyed a drama-free family dinner together. But last week, everything blew up again in spectacular fashion. Ruth called me out of the blue on a Tuesday night, sobbing hysterically. At first, I couldn't understand what she was saying. When she finally calmed down enough to speak clearly, I was stunned by what she told me. Apparently, Andy had started dating one of Ruth's close friends, Olivia, 24F, shortly after their breakup. Ruth had just found out because Andy and Olivia made their relationship Facebook official. She felt blindsided and betrayed by both of them. As Ruth ranted about Andy and Olivia, more details came out. It turns out that Olivia had been at Ruth's birthday party and had comforted Andy after the failed proposal. They'd stayed in touch afterward, initially just as friends. But over time, their relationship had developed into something more. I tried to comfort Ruth, telling her that Andy and Olivia's actions said more about them than her. But Ruth quickly turned her anger on me. She accused me of knowing about Andy and Olivia all along and keeping it from her. I told her honestly that I had no idea, but she wouldn't believe me. She convinced herself that I must have orchestrated the whole thing to hurt her. Ruth's accusations quickly escalated. She dredged up every perceived slight and injustice from our entire lives. She claimed I'd always been jealous of her and had spent years trying to sabotage her happiness. She brought up incidents from our childhood, twisting them to paint me as the villain. According to Ruth, I had deliberately tripped her at her dance recital when she was 8. I hadn't even been there. I had stolen her prom date. He had asked me first, and I'd turned him down. I had sabotaged her college applications. I'd actually helped her proofread them. By the end of the call, Ruth was screaming that she hated me and never wanted to speak to me again. She said I was dead to her and she wished she was an only child. Then she hung up, leaving me shocked and hurt. I was completely blindsided by Ruth's outburst. I thought we'd been making real progress, but it seems like she was just bottling up her negative feelings. Now all that resentment has exploded, and we're worse off than before. The day after Ruth's call, I got a series of angry messages from our parents. Apparently, Ruth had called them immediately after hanging up with me and told them her version of events. Now they're convinced that I'm somehow responsible for Andy and Olivia getting together. Our parents have been calling and texting nonstop, demanding that I apologize to Ruth and fix things. My mom left a voicemail accusing me of being a toxic influence in Ruth's life. My dad sent an email saying I needed to make this right if I ever wanted to be part of the family again. I've tried explaining that I had nothing to do with Andy and Olivia's relationship, but they won't listen. They're convinced I'm somehow responsible for Ruth's unhappiness. It's like we've regressed back to our childhood dynamics, with Ruth as the favored child who can do no wrong, and me as the scapegoat for all her problems. At this point, I'm at a loss for what to do. I want to have a relationship with my sister, but I'm tired of being her emotional punching bag. I'm hurt by how quickly she turned on me and how easily she believed I would betray her. And I'm frustrated that our parents are once again taking her side without question. I'm considering taking a step back and going low contact with my family for a while. I think I need some time and space to process everything that's happened. But I'm worried that distancing myself will only reinforce their belief that I'm the problem. Part of me wants to reach out to Andy or Olivia to get their side of the story. But I'm afraid that would only make things worse if Ruth found out. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to get any more involved in this mess. I appreciate any advice or perspectives as I try to navigate this messy situation. Thanks for listening, Reddit. Update 3. It's been about 3 months since everything blew up with Ruth, and I wanted to give a final update on the situation. A lot has changed, and I've done a lot of reflecting on my relationship with my family. After Ruth's blow-up, I decided to take a break from communicating with her and our parents. I blocked their numbers and social media accounts for a month to give myself some space. During that time, I focused on my own life and mental health. I threw myself into work and picked up some new hobbies. I started taking a pottery class, which I found surprisingly therapeutic. There's something calming about working with clay and creating something tangible. I also spent more time with friends who've known me for years and understand my family dynamics. Their support and outside perspective helped me see that I wasn't crazy for feeling hurt and frustrated. They encouraged me to set boundaries and prioritize my own well-being. When I finally felt ready, I reached out to Ruth via email. I explained that while I cared about her, I needed to set some boundaries in our relationship. I made it clear that I wouldn't tolerate being blamed for things outside my control or treated as an emotional punching bag. I also expressed that I wanted to work on our relationship, but only if she was willing to communicate respectfully and honestly. To my surprise, Ruth responded positively. She apologized for her outburst and admitted she'd been in a bad place emotionally. She said she'd had time to think about things and realized she'd overreacted. We agreed to meet up and talk things through in person. Our conversation wasn't easy, but it was productive. We met at a neutral location, a quiet cafe near my apartment. At first, things were tense and awkward. But as we started talking, the words began to flow more freely. We both acknowledged that we had a lot of work to do on our relationship. Ruth admitted that she'd been struggling with her self-esteem since the breakup with Andy. She confessed that seeing him with Olivia had triggered all her insecurities, and she'd lashed out at me because I was an easy target. She also acknowledged that she'd taken our parents' favoritism for granted and never considered how it affected me. For my part, I opened up about how hurt I'd been by her accusations and how tired I was of always being cast as the villain in our family dynamic. I explained that while I wanted a relationship with her, I needed her to respect my boundaries and treat me as an equal. By the end of our talk, we'd made some progress. Ruth agreed to start therapy to deal with her own issues. We decided to take things slow and rebuild trust gradually. We made plans to meet up once a month for lunch, with the agreement that we'd both make an effort to listen and communicate openly. As for our parents, I had a long talk with them as well. I explained how their favoritism had affected me growing up and how their current behavior was damaging our family dynamics. They were defensive at first, insisting they had always treated us equally. But when I gave specific examples, I could see them starting to understand. It wasn't an easy conversation. There were tears and raised voices on both sides. But by the end, my parents agreed to family counseling. They said they wanted to work on building better relationships with both their daughters. It's still early days, but I'm cautiously optimistic about the future of my family relationships. We're all working on communicating better and respecting each other's boundaries. Last week, we had our first family dinner since the blow-up. It wasn't perfect, there were still some awkward moments and old habits die hard. But it felt like a step in the right direction. I've learned a lot through this whole experience. I realized that I can't control how others behave, but I can control how I respond. I'm working on letting go of old resentments and focusing on building healthier relationships going forward. I've also learned the importance of setting boundaries and standing up for myself, even with family. There's still a long road ahead. Years of family dynamics don't change overnight. But I'm hopeful that with continued effort, my family can move past our issues and build stronger bonds. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time and focusing on my own growth and happiness. Thank you to everyone who offered advice and support throughout this journey. Your perspectives helped me gain clarity on a difficult situation. I'm grateful for this community and the insights you've shared. Here's to hoping for brighter days ahead for all of us dealing with family drama.